I didn't know my life was about to split into a before and an after on a hiking trail until I watched my sister's hand slide onto my boyfriend's arm like it belonged there. It wasn't a quick, accidental brush. It was slow, casual, familiar. And the worst part? He didn't move away. I remember standing a few steps behind them, my boots sinking into damp soil, my lungs burning from the climb, not just from the hill, but from the way my chest felt too tight for air. My boyfriend Derek was stopped at the edge of the overlook with his sketchbook open. My sister Lucia leaned in so close her hair almost touched his shoulder, laughing like she'd been the one invited. Like I wasn't right there. I told myself I was being sensitive, that I was imagining things, that sisters don't do that. But my body knew before my brain wanted to admit it, something was wrong. On the drive back, Lucia sat in the front seat beside him, chatting like they'd always been this comfortable. She kept turning toward him when she spoke, touching his forearm when she laughed, asking him about our next hike, like it was already scheduled. I stared out the window, counting mile markers like they were the only steady thing left. That night, when I finally said it, quietly, carefully, "Can you please ask her to stop?" Derek exhaled like I'd offended him. "She's just being friendly," he said. "You're overthinking it." Overthinking. That word sank into me like a hook. Because for months, Lucia had been appearing wherever Derek and I were. Then the texting started. Then the touching. Then the way she posted photos from my day with my boyfriend, without me in a single frame. And then came the moment that changed everything. A notification. A glimpse of Derek's screen. Lucia's name. A message thread I wasn't supposed to see. Not just flirting. Not just inside jokes. But lies. About me. About me being drunk at parties. About me getting too close with other guys. About me probably cheating. I didn't know what made me feel sicker, Lucia writing it or Derek reading it, and not shutting it down. I'm 20 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the quieter sister. Not the tragic kind of quiet, not the poor, overlooked child kind of quiet, just the one who didn't win the family's invisible contests. Lucia is 2 years older than me, 22 now, and she has always moved through the world like the spotlight was built for her and everyone else was supposed to adjust their eyes. When we were kids, she got straight A's with that effortless confidence teachers love. I struggled with math and learned early how to smile when adults said, "Your sister is so smart." Lucia made varsity soccer. I got cut from JV. Lucia got into her dream college. I started at community college and transferred later. No one in my family ever said, "We love Lucia more." They didn't have to. It was in the way their voices lifted when they introduced her to people. It was in the way my dad threw a huge party for her graduation. Big cake, decorations, speeches, while my graduation was dinner at a chain restaurant with polite smiles and a quick check at the end. And here's the thing that makes it complicated. Lucia didn't always act cruel about it. She didn't shove it in my face every day. Sometimes she helped me with homework. Sometimes she let me tag along with her friends when I couldn't figure out how to belong in my own grade. Sometimes she'd toss me a hoodie and say, "Wear this," like she was the older sister who still remembered what it felt like to be left out. That's why it took me so long to trust my instincts later. Because I wasn't raised to believe Lucia would take from me. I was raised to believe she would always be the one who got things first. College, attention, praise. And I'd be the one who learned to be happy for her. Things got better for me when I transferred to a 4-year university last year. I found my place in the art program, the kind of place where nobody cared that I wasn't a straight A student in high school. People cared about what I made, what I noticed, what I felt. I made friends who didn't treat me like a background character. And that's where I met Derek. He's 25, a senior in the same program. Artistic, quieter, the kind of guy who listens with his whole face. Average height, dark hair, glasses. Nothing flashy, nothing performative. He paints landscapes that look like they're holding their breath. He hikes on weekends to find spots to sketch, and when he talks about light and shadows, he gets this soft intensity in his voice like the world is worth studying. 6 months ago, we started dating. It was my first serious relationship, my first real one, and I didn't realize how much that mattered until later, because when it's your first, you don't have a pattern to compare it to. You don't know what's normal and what's a warning. With Derek, I felt safe. He wasn't like the guys Lucia usually dates. She goes for the typical college athlete type. Loud confidence, broad shoulders, the kind of boy who knows he'll be noticed when he walks in. Derek is the opposite. He doesn't need attention. He almost looks uncomfortable when too many people look at him at once. That was part of what I loved. When I brought Derek home 3 months ago, I was nervous. New relationship nerves. Meet the family nerves. Please don't let this be weird nerves. At first, it wasn't. Lucia smiled, asked him about his art, even complimented one of his pieces when I showed her a photo on his phone. My mom was thrilled. She kept saying how sweet it was that I found someone who shared my interests. My dad seemed relieved that I was with someone stable, someone who didn't feel like a risky choice. For a moment, I let myself relax. I remember standing in the kitchen while Lucia and Derek talked about paintings and thinking, maybe I finally have something that's mine, something I didn't have to compete for. But after that visit, the coincidence started. Lucia randomly showed up at the campus coffee shop when Derek and I went there. She happened to be near the art building on weekends when we worked. She'd appear with her laptop, her smile too easy, her voice too bright, like she was just passing by. At first, I truly believed it was nothing. Because who thinks their own sister is scouting their boyfriend? Then the touching started. Not overt, not scandalous enough for anyone else to call it out. A hand on Derek's shoulder when she laughed. A little brush of lint off his shirt. A casual reach to fix his hair like she had permission. And every time, Derek would stiffen just slightly, like his body knew it was too much, but he never said anything. He's polite to a fault, and for a while I mistook that for kindness. When I mentioned it, gently, Derek shrugged. Some people are just touchy, he said. She's being friendly. He even compared her to his own sister, saying, my sister is like that with my friends. So I tried to swallow my discomfort like it was a flaw in me. Then Lucia started texting him directly. Photos of sunsets. Buildings she claimed reminded her of his paintings. Questions about art supplies. Questions she never asked me, even though I was the one in the art program too. She followed all his social media and liked everything. Everything. When I brought it up again, Derek gave me that patient look people use when they think you're being irrational. Don't make this into something, he said. She's probably just trying to bond because you matter to her. That sentence should have made me feel warm. Instead, it made my stomach sink, because Lucia had never bonded with anything I loved before. Not unless it benefited her. Still, I tried. I really did. I told myself, you're being paranoid. You're projecting old sibling insecurities onto a new relationship. Don't sabotage your first real love. And then, 3 weeks before the hiking trip, Lucia signed up for the same pottery class Derek was taking as an elective. Same section, same time slot. Our campus only has 2 pottery sections. Lucia claimed she didn't know he was in it. And Derek, of course, believed her. She's struggling, he told me. I feel bad. I'm just helping her. Helping. That word became a weapon later, because it made me sound cruel for having boundaries. And it made Lucia look innocent while she stood closer and closer to the thing I loved. By the time Lucia called me crying the night before the hike, begging to come with us because she'd fought with her roommate, I was already trained to ignore the warning bells inside me. I said yes. I thought I was being a good sister. I didn't realize I was walking directly into the moment where Lucia would stop pretending it was coincidence and start acting like Derek was hers to claim. It's funny how one small moment can make everything else feel like it's been building up to it, like a crack in the foundation that suddenly crumbles the whole house. That hiking trip, which was supposed to be a quiet weekend away with Derek, is when I finally realized that things were much worse than I had imagined. At first, I kept telling myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe Lucia was struggling with something and just needed her sister around. But looking back now, I see it for what it was, her carefully planted seeds of manipulation. The morning of the hike, Lucia showed up at my dorm wearing clothes that didn't belong in a hiking trip. Tight leggings, a crop top, and enough makeup to suggest she thought it was a fashion show, not a nature trail. When we drove to the trail, I noticed right away how she sat next to Derek in the front seat. She said she got motion sickness in the back, but that didn't stop her from leaning into every word Derek said. She didn't even look at me. I sat there in the back seat, feeling like the third wheel in my own relationship. As we hiked, I tried to keep my distance. Let them talk, let them laugh. But it was clear that Lucia had no intention of letting me have a moment with Derek. She hovered around him, leaning over his shoulder as he sketched, laughing at everything he said. She asked questions about his art, his methods, his life, and every time I tried to add something to the conversation, she would sweep it away and make it about her. At lunch, it got worse. We sat on a log, Derek with his sketchbook, Lucia leaning way too close to him. She would brush against him when she reached for her sandwich. She kept pointing at his sketches, touching his arm like they were old friends, sharing something that was only meant to be between Derek and me. I looked around, trying to find a spot to sit, but there was nowhere else. I was already too far outside the conversation. So I ate my sandwich on a rock, just out of reach of their laughter. But the worst part? When Derek offered to teach her some basic sketching techniques. His shoulder brushed hers as they stood side by side. Their hands were so close on the pencil that I might as well have been invisible. It wasn't about the art anymore. It wasn't about learning. It was about her getting closer. To him. To my boyfriend. I tried to focus on the trail as we finished the hike, but the knot in my stomach had become a constant companion. Every time I glanced at Derek and Lucia, I saw them sharing inside jokes. Their faces lit up in ways I never saw between us. That night, when I finally confronted Derek, he tried to brush it off, said I was being too sensitive, and that Lucia was just enthusiastic about trying new things. He said it wasn't anything personal, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the way he avoided looking me in the eyes when he said it. I pressed harder. Does this look like just friendly bonding to you? Because it sure doesn't feel like that to me. He didn't have an answer. Instead, he said something I didn't expect. You're being possessive. The words cut deeper than I expected. My stomach churned as the weight of his accusations sank in. I wasn't being possessive. I was being disrespected. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine anymore. The jealousy I felt wasn't imagined. It was a response to their behavior. I wasn't overreacting. I was seeing the truth, and it terrified me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek had been letting it happen, letting Lucia get closer, letting her invade the spaces that had once been mine. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. I wasn't the only one who had noticed it. Everyone had. At some point, I told Derek, I can't just sit back and watch this. I'm not being paranoid. This is crossing a line. But his face hardened, and he said nothing. He couldn't even apologize for the way he had let things escalate. He didn't want to see it, and for that, I felt betrayed. By the time we were back at campus, I wasn't sure who I was more upset with, Lucia for pushing me aside, or Derek for letting her. And then, of course, it all spiraled. That night, I saw the Instagram posts. Lucia had posted 3 photos from our hike, one of the trail, one of Derek sketching, and one of the two of them together, leaning over his sketchbook, looking like they were a couple. She didn't post a single photo with me in it, even though I had been the one taking all the pictures. Her caption was simple but suffocating, discovering a love for nature and art thanks to an amazing teacher. And Derek, of course, liked the post. That's when I felt the final shift. It wasn't just about boundaries anymore. It was about how far gone I had let myself become, how much I had ignored because I didn't want to believe my sister and my boyfriend were crossing lines right in front of me. But it didn't stop there. Derek's text came later that night, apologizing for being too nice to Lucia. He said he didn't want to upset me, that I was misinterpreting things. I should have been furious. I should have demanded answers. But instead, I said something that surprised me. I think I need space. I don't want to fight about this anymore. I can't keep pretending this is normal. And as I hung up, something inside me clicked. I didn't know my world would split in half the moment Lucia sent me that text. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit anything wrong. She didn't acknowledge how much pain she had caused. Instead, she wrote me a message that cut deeper than anything Derek had ever said to me. It was a long text, and I should have expected it. Her signature mix of guilt and self-righteousness, always painted with the same brush. I'm sorry you feel that way, but it's not my fault. She claimed I was being childish, that I had ruined everything by not seeing how much she was trying to bond with Derek. It was like she didn't care that she'd been intruding on my relationship. Her goal was always the same, to convince me that I was the one at fault, that I was being unfair. You know, if you just trusted me more, maybe this wouldn't be such an issue, she wrote. I thought you were better than this, but maybe I was wrong. Derek is a good guy, and I care about him. You're overthinking it. I almost threw my phone across the room. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was her telling me to my face that my feelings didn't matter, that I didn't deserve respect. I was standing in the kitchen at that moment, scrolling through her text, and I suddenly couldn't breathe. I had put so much of myself into that relationship, into Derek, into trusting him and thinking we had something real. And here she was, acting like everything was just a game to her. And then, when I felt like I had no more room to be hurt, she dropped the bombshell. Derek and I are spending the weekend together. We've decided to take some time to get to know each other better. That was it. I hadn't even asked for that much. Just some honesty, some accountability for her actions, some boundary setting from Derek. But it felt like I'd been slapped in the face. They were already making plans behind my back. While I was still fighting to keep everything intact, they were moving forward like they'd never even been a part of my life. I had known deep down that something was off, that something wasn't right. But in that moment, I realized what I'd been avoiding. The truth was undeniable. Derek had never been mine. Lucia had never been my sister. They had both been playing me from the beginning. I could feel the tears start to build in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I clenched my fists and gritted my teeth. "This is it," I whispered to myself. "This is where it all ends." I sent a text back to Lucia. No emotional outburst, no curse words, just simple, blunt honesty. "You've crossed a line and I'm done. Don't contact me again. It's over." Then I turned my phone off. The silence in the apartment was deafening. It felt like everything was happening at once. The end of a relationship that had once felt perfect. The crumbling of a bond I never thought could break. The weight of betrayal settling deep in my chest. But I had done it. I had walked away. When I finally turned my phone back on, the notifications piled up. I saw Lucia's messages, Derek's missed calls, texts from friends asking if I was okay. But there was nothing they could say anymore. They had both shown me exactly who they were. The lies, the manipulation, the emotional gaslighting, it was all coming to light, and I had finally been able to see the truth. I didn't reply to anyone. Instead, I packed a bag and drove to a quiet cabin in the woods for the weekend. It wasn't a getaway. It wasn't about finding answers or closure. It was about giving myself space to breathe, to reclaim my mind, and to remember who I was before they came into my life. I stayed in that cabin for 2 days, with nothing but my thoughts. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply let myself be still. And for the first time in months, I felt free. I spent the next few days in that cabin, alone with my thoughts. The phone stayed off. There were no messages from Derek, no texts from Lucia trying to explain herself, no guilt-laden calls from mutual friends. It was strange, almost too quiet, but it was what I needed. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel. Relief, maybe. A sense of vindication. But it didn't come the way I thought it would. Instead, there was this dull ache in my chest, like something I'd built and cared for had just vanished. I spent the first day trying to figure out how I'd let it get this far. How had I ignored the signs? How had I missed the little things that were there from the beginning? Looking back, I could see it all. The way Derek never set boundaries. The way Lucia had always been the golden child of our family. The way they both pretended everything was fine while I watched my relationship slip away. The manipulation was so subtle at first that it was easy to miss. It wasn't like a big confrontation or a betrayal you could point to immediately. It was the slow accumulation of little moments, touches, glances, words left unsaid, that added up until there was nothing left but emptiness. But I also had to face something else, something harder. Was I really that jealous? Was I really overreacting to something that, in the grand scheme of things, shouldn't have mattered? Was I too possessive of Derek? The thought kept nagging at me. The seed of doubt they planted in me made it harder to trust myself. I replayed everything in my head. I tried to remember the conversations, the moments that should have been red flags. But I kept going in circles, wondering if I'd missed something important. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I shouldn't have confronted them. Maybe I should have tried harder to talk it out. The guilt was almost unbearable. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake, if walking away was the right choice. But then, the weight of their silence on the other side of it all felt like the answer. Neither of them had reached out in a meaningful way. Not Derek, not Lucia. It was only apologies in the form of excuses. It was only them acting like nothing was wrong, like I was the problem for wanting respect, for wanting boundaries. That's when I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit to myself. I had given so much of myself to them. My trust, my time, my love, and for what? To be manipulated, to be gaslighted, to be lied to? The answer in the end was clear. It wasn't about them, it was about me. I had to stop doubting myself. I had to trust the instincts that had been warning me for months. I had to believe that I deserved better than what they had offered. As I sat there in that cabin, the realization hit me like a wave. I was not crazy. I wasn't possessive. I wasn't overreacting. I had every right to protect myself from what was clearly a toxic situation. The weekend ended, and I packed up to go home, but it wasn't a return to normal. It was a return to a new reality, a reality where I had learned to trust myself and hold on to my self-worth, even if it meant cutting out people who didn't respect me. I texted Monica on my way back, telling her everything. She didn't judge me. She didn't push me to forgive Lucia. She just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone in my family truly understood. She didn't agree with what Lucia had done, but she also understood why I needed space, and I appreciated that. When I got home, I made another decision. I knew I couldn't keep pretending things would go back to normal. There was no going back to a time when I trusted Derek and Lucia. They had made their choices. Now, I had to make mine. I deleted Derek's number. I blocked Lucia from all my social media. I told myself I was done with trying to fix what was broken. That wasn't easy to do. I still loved Derek. I still loved the person I thought he was. But I couldn't keep holding on to a version of him that had never really existed. I was done pretending that everything was okay when I knew it wasn't. Once I made the decision to cut Derek and Lucia out of my life, I thought the hard part was over. I thought the hardest thing would be facing the anger and heartbreak, but what came next was worse than anything I had expected. I hadn't anticipated how quickly everything would escalate. I hadn't prepared myself for the guilt trip, the pressure from my family, or the mounting frustration that came with their constant interference. It felt like the moment I closed that door, they all opened theirs to barge in. It started with Monica. I knew she was trying to stay neutral, but every time we spoke, I could feel the weight of her loyalty, pulling her in different directions. She didn't want to take sides, but she also didn't want me to cut Lucia out completely. "I don't think you should cut her off completely," she told me one night when we were on the phone. "She's your sister. You can't just throw that away." I felt a sharp sting. Was she really asking me to forgive her? To go back to pretending everything was okay? "I'm not throwing it away, Monica," I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. "But I can't keep putting myself in situations where I'm being treated like a fool. I'm done with pretending things are normal when they're not." Monica didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "I just think you're overreacting. You've been mad at Lucia before. You'll get past it." I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't imagining what had happened. But Monica wasn't done yet. She tried again, telling me that I should give Lucia time to get her act together. But all I could think about was how everything I'd been through, every lie, every betrayal, was being swept aside as if it didn't matter, as if my feelings didn't matter. That conversation with Monica was the first time I realized that this wasn't just about Derek or Lucia. This was about a family dynamic that had never really worked. My parents had always favored Lucia, even when I was younger, and now they were showing up in full force to remind me that I was the one causing the rift. A few days later, I received a call from my mom. She asked if I'd spoken to Lucia, if I'd tried to work things out with her. She asked me why I was being so stubborn. "She's your sister, honey. Family is all you have." Her words stung in a way that felt sharp and true, but also deeply unfair. I wasn't just supposed to forgive Lucia because she was family. I wasn't supposed to forgive her for doing something horrible to me. But my mom was adamant. She didn't understand. She thought I was overreacting too. To her, the biggest issue wasn't the betrayal. It was that I couldn't just let it go for the sake of family. Every day, I felt like I was losing more than just my relationship with Derek and Lucia. I was losing the idea of family as I had known it. The pressure only increased when I received texts from Derek. Even after everything, even after I made it clear I was done, he wouldn't stop trying to explain himself. He told me he was sorry for hurting me, but his apologies came in the form of excuses, never truly owning up to his actions, never acknowledging that he had let Lucia steal my trust. He said things like, "I never meant to hurt you," but it didn't feel like he was apologizing for his actions. It felt like he was apologizing because I had noticed. I kept ignoring his texts, but the guilt started to gnaw at me. What if I was wrong? What if I really was overreacting? The guilt was relentless. And then came the part that I didn't expect. Lucia started reaching out to my friends. She told them her side of the story. She painted herself as the victim, saying I was being controlling and possessive just like Derek had. She said I had misunderstood her intentions. She wanted my friends to believe that I was overreacting, and worse than that, she wanted them to feel sorry for her. I felt my blood boil. She was rewriting everything, turning herself into the innocent one. And yet I was the one who was in the right, who had the facts on my side. She was trying to manipulate everyone, including my own friends, into thinking I was the villain. That was when I realized something. If I was going to get through this, I couldn't rely on anyone else to stand by me. I had to trust my own instincts, and if that meant cutting out toxic people, even family, then that's what I had to do. But the hardest part of all of this wasn't losing Derek or Lucia. It was realizing that my family, the people I loved, were so wrapped up in their own version of the truth that they couldn't see what was happening. They couldn't see the manipulation, the lies, the emotional abuse, I wasn't just losing Derek and Lucia, I was losing my family's support too. I finally had to accept that no matter how much I wanted them to understand, no matter how many times I tried to explain myself, they weren't going to get it. It wasn't about them, it was about me taking control of my own life. It was about standing up for myself and my boundaries, even if no one else did. I told Monica that I needed time. I couldn't keep fighting this battle with her too. She didn't understand, but that was okay. I had to walk this road alone. The days following my decision to step away from Derek and Lucia were harder than I could have imagined. For a while, I thought the hardest part would be walking away from them, cutting ties, and accepting what had happened. But what I didn't expect was the crushing weight of isolation that followed. It wasn't just about losing them, it was about everything else. It was about losing my place in the family, losing the sense of belonging that I had held on to for so long. I'd spent so much of my life trying to prove I was a good daughter, a good sister, a good partner. And now, in the span of just a few weeks, it felt like I'd lost everything. I kept myself busy, really busy. I threw myself into work, into my studies, into anything that would keep my mind occupied. I couldn't allow myself to stop, to think too much, because the moment I stopped, I had to confront the truth. I felt like I had nothing left. The phone calls, the texts, the messages, they didn't stop coming from my family. They tried to call, tried to guilt trip me into talking to Lucia again. My mom, my dad, even Monica, all of them urged me to just forgive her and let things go. My dad even said I was being too dramatic. That family was more important than my feelings. But what hurt the most was that they were blind to the reality of what had happened. They didn't see the manipulation. They didn't see how Lucia had used me, how Derek had let her. Instead, they just saw me as the problem, as the one who was unreasonable. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from them, my heart sank. Every time I saw Lucia's name or Derek's, the world seemed to tilt in a way that made me feel like I was spinning out of control. It wasn't just about losing them. It was about how the entire foundation I had built my life on had cracked. I had spent so much time convincing myself that family was supposed to be forever, that no matter what, you always have them, and that they should always have your back. But in my darkest moment, I realized that my family didn't even see me. They didn't see my pain, my sacrifice, my struggles. They only saw Lucia's version of events, the one where I was the enemy. That realization hit me hard. There I was, standing at the lowest point I'd been in a long time, feeling utterly and completely alone. I was alone in my pain, alone in my decision to walk away. Even though I had friends who tried to support me, I couldn't shake the loneliness that had settled in my chest. I spent entire nights lying in bed, unable to sleep. I'd replay conversations, try to figure out where it had all gone wrong, where I had gone wrong. Was I too trusting? Was I too naive? Was I foolish to think that Derek was the kind of person who would respect me? I tried to blame myself. I thought, maybe I'm just not enough. Maybe this is all my fault. I wondered if I had done something to cause them to turn away. But then the deeper truth hit me. No matter how much I blamed myself, it wouldn't change the fact that Lucia had crossed every line, that Derek had allowed it, and that both of them had let me walk away feeling like I was the one at fault. I couldn't fix any of it. I couldn't make them understand. The pain of that truth was almost too much to bear. But I wasn't completely broken. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. Not my strength, not my sense of self. Even if it meant enduring this crushing loneliness, I knew I had to stand firm. I needed time. I needed space to heal. So I took that time. For the first time in months, I made myself a promise. I promised myself that I would learn to trust again. I would learn to trust myself, my instincts, my feelings, my ability to make decisions that were best for me. I didn't need to rely on anyone else's approval. It was a quiet moment of rebellion, against Lucia, against Derek, against the family who refused to see my pain. But it was also a moment of strength. I wasn't just surviving. I was reclaiming my life. I was taking back the pieces of me that had been lost. And somewhere in that silence, I began to heal. The weeks after I cut ties with Lucia and Derek were the hardest and the most liberating all at once. It wasn't about just stepping away from people I had loved. It was about stepping away from the versions of myself they had molded, the ones that had bent to their will and put their needs first. But something inside me shifted gradually. Slowly, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a storm, I started to feel something stronger than the weight of their absence. I felt my own worth again. and I had to remind myself of that every single day. I started going to therapy. It wasn't an instant cure, but it helped. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me untangle all the emotions I had been burying for so long: anger, fear, sadness, but also the relief that came from finally taking control of my life. And over time, something amazing happened. The more I focused on myself, the less I felt the pull of guilt. The less I let my family's opinions and expectations shape who I was. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I went on long walks in the park, took weekend trips to visit friends, spent evenings painting again, like I used to, before everything had gotten so messy. The art felt different this time. It wasn't just about creativity. It was about reclaiming something that had always been mine, something that was purely me. The turning point came when I stopped needing them to validate me. It was like a switch flipped one afternoon while I was sitting in my apartment, staring out the window as the sun dipped below the skyline. I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone, especially not to people who had hurt me. I started to see my own value, how far I had come, how much I had accomplished. I was proud of my career, proud of the way I had made decisions on my own, proud of the resilience I had shown even when the people closest to me didn't. I was no longer the silent sister, the one who was always in the shadow of someone else's spotlight. I was carving out my own path, and it was okay for me to stand in the sun, unapologetically. And then one day, I heard from Derek again. It wasn't a call or a text, but an email. At first, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to relive all the hurt again, but I also knew that I had to face it if I was ever going to fully move on. The subject line was simple: I owe you an apology. I clicked open. The email was long. Derek apologized for everything: how he had let Lucia manipulate him, how he had been so blind to the hurt he caused me, and how sorry he was for breaking my trust. He admitted that he had been weak, that he had let my sister get too close, that he had allowed their relationship to spiral out of control without ever stopping to consider how much it would hurt me. He acknowledged that he was never honest with me about his feelings and that he should have respected me enough to draw clear boundaries. He said that he had learned from his mistakes and wanted to make things right. It took everything in me not to respond right away, not to let the flood of emotions take over. Instead, I sat with it for a while. I thought about how much I had changed, how much stronger I had become. And for the first time, I felt indifferent. Not angry, not vindicated, not sad, just indifferent. I realized that I didn't need his apology. I didn't need anything from him anymore. I had already given him enough space in my life, more than he deserved. So I let the email sit in my inbox, and I left it there. In that moment, I understood something profound. I didn't need closure from him or Lucia. I didn't need to hear them say they were sorry to feel validated. My journey was mine, and I was the one who had to keep moving forward. No apology could change what had happened, but it also couldn't define me anymore. I had learned to forgive, but more importantly, I had learned to let go, and that was my power. The days after Derek's email were oddly quiet. Nothing major happened, no dramatic confrontations, no big reveals. But the silence spoke volumes. It was the kind of silence that came when you no longer cared about the outcome, when the emotional weight of a situation no longer had the power to affect you. I realized that by walking away, I had already won. The fallout wasn't just about losing Derek or Lucia, it was about watching their world crumble without me in it. Watching them face the consequences of their choices while I stood strong in the life I had built for myself. I didn't need to seek revenge. I didn't need to bring anyone down. I just needed to continue living my truth, and that was more powerful than anything they could say or do. Monica called me a week after I received Derek's email. I don't know what to do anymore, she said. Mom and Dad are really pushing me to get you and Lucia to talk. They think everything's been blown out of proportion. I felt a familiar pang in my chest. The weight of my family's expectations pressing down. They didn't understand. But Monica, at least, was trying to see things from my perspective. You don't have to choose sides, Monica, I told her quietly. But I can't go back to how things were. I can't keep pretending like everything is okay when it's not. I could hear the tension in her voice. She wanted me to forgive. She wanted everything to go back to normal. But she wasn't ready to admit that this was the new normal, the one where I didn't have to bend to their version of things. We talked for a while longer, but I knew in my heart that our relationship would never be the same. And that was okay. Sometimes family had to respect the boundaries you set, even if they didn't understand them. In the following weeks, the fallout spread in unexpected ways. Monica kept trying to mediate between me and Lucia, but I could tell she was starting to get frustrated. She didn't like the distance that had grown between us. She didn't like that I wasn't eager to heal things with Lucia. But as much as I loved Monica, I couldn't let her drag me back into something toxic. Lucia, on the other hand, began reaching out to people we both knew, spinning her narrative. She told anyone who would listen that I was being unreasonable, that I was too sensitive, and that I was overreacting to a situation that wasn't even as serious as I was making it. She even tried reaching out to my friends, planting seeds of doubt about the way I had handled everything. But I didn't care anymore. There was power in indifference. There was power in watching her struggle to rewrite the story, knowing that the people who mattered, the ones who truly cared about me, saw through her lies. What hurt more was seeing my parents start to take Lucia's side. They didn't know the full story, but that didn't stop them from excusing her actions. They had always been blind to her manipulative tendencies. My mom sent me a text asking me to reconsider my decision, but I didn't reply. It was a strange feeling, realizing that the people I had spent years trying to please didn't see me, that they still chose her, because it was easier, because she was their perfect little girl, their golden child, and I was the one who had walked away. But here's the thing, I didn't need their approval anymore. The real fallout was from watching them align with someone who had wronged me. But even that was freeing, because I realized something crucial. I didn't need them to validate my decisions. I didn't need them to support my choices. I had already chosen myself. As time passed, I saw the consequences of my decision unfold. Derek and Lucia's relationship was strained. They tried to go on as though nothing had happened, but I knew the truth. Derek had reached out to Monica again, asking about me, talking about how badly he felt for how things had ended, but by then, it didn't matter. I had moved on. Lucia started distancing herself from the rest of the family too. Her selfishness and manipulation were slowly being exposed, and people began to notice that she wasn't as innocent as she claimed to be. She had become isolated in her own web of lies. I didn't take any satisfaction in watching their lives unravel. I didn't need to. I had already gotten what I wanted: peace. The truth always has a way of revealing itself, even when you're not trying to make it happen. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to push back. I just needed to live my life with integrity and to keep moving forward. It's been months since I made the decision to walk away from Derek and Lucia, and while the memories of the hurt haven't faded completely, I can honestly say that I am in a better place than I ever thought possible. The silence I once dreaded is now a source of comfort. I don't feel that ache in my chest when I think of them anymore. I don't feel like I'm being held hostage by their version of the story. I no longer carry the weight of needing their approval or their validation. What I've learned over the past several months is that I can stand on my own, independent of the people I once thought would always be by my side. The truth is, I've learned to embrace the discomfort, the loneliness, and the challenges that came with letting go of the people who had once meant everything to me. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I questioned whether I made the right decision. But every day, I've been reminded that my peace, my mental health, and my self-respect are worth more than any family bond that seeks to control or diminish me. I've spent time doing the things I love. I've poured myself into my art, the one thing that always gave me clarity, the one thing that always reminded me who I am without anyone else's influence. I took solo trips, explored new places, and reconnected with old friends who reminded me that I am capable of being loved and supported for who I am, not for who I'm expected to be. I started dating again. This time, it's different. I'm not looking for someone to fill the gaps left by people who didn't respect me. I'm not looking for someone to validate me or to complete me. I'm looking for someone who sees me, who values me, and who understands the importance of mutual respect and trust. The lessons I've learned from this experience are hard-earned, but they are mine. Trust yourself. I spent so much time second-guessing my decisions, wondering if I was wrong for walking away. But I've learned to trust my instincts. I've learned to trust that I know what's best for me, and I don't need anyone else to tell me otherwise. Boundaries are essential. Walking away wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at Derek or Lucia. It was about setting boundaries that kept me safe, that kept me whole. I realized that boundaries aren't a sign of weakness. They're a sign of strength. And if people can't respect those boundaries, then they have no place in my life. Family isn't always right. For so long, I believed that family had to come first, that I had to sacrifice for them, no matter how much it hurt. But the truth is, family doesn't always have the best interests of its members at heart. Sometimes you have to protect yourself, even from family, in order to heal. Forgiveness is for you, not them. I don't hold on to anger anymore. I don't need to forgive Lucia or Derek for the sake of their peace. I forgive them for my peace. Forgiveness doesn't mean I forget, but it means I'm no longer letting their actions control my happiness or my future. You are enough. I used to feel like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't worthy of love, respect, or trust. But now I know that I am. I am enough, and the right people will recognize that. In the end, this journey wasn't just about walking away from people who hurt me. It was about walking toward the best version of myself. It was about realizing that I am the architect of my own happiness, and I am the one who gets to decide who belongs in my life. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll talk to Lucia and Derek again, but that's not for me to decide now. What I know is that I've built a life I can be proud of, one where I am no longer waiting for anyone's approval. I am finally living for myself. So, this is the last chapter. Not because there's no more story to tell, but because I'm finally at peace with where I am. I've reclaimed my life, my worth, and my peace, and that's more than enough. I'm ready for whatever comes next.